First of all, great welcome to our friends from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for coming. Very, very excited to really organize on behalf of Asia Society, Japan Center, and International House Japan, the symposium commemorating what will hopefully be a kind of a renewed energy around Hong Kong-Japan relations, which since the 70s has been a very strong relationship. But we hope that better times, more dynamic times are to come, and we have great speakers to talk about such potential across the sectors. So really a huge thanks to our friends from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for coming. All of us know that Japan and Hong Kong are some of the most dynamic, important trading partners. What will be also evident in today's panel is the kind of deep personal ties that underpin that. Many businesses have Japan-Hong Kong elements. Many of us have, in Japan side, lived in Hong Kong, worked in Hong Kong, but also many of our Hong Kong friends have spent a tremendous amount of time in Japan. So hopefully this is a chance to really celebrate the past, but hopefully look forward to kind of investing in the development of that relationship. One thing at the end to really introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Adrian Cheng. Thank you so much for coming as well. Adrian kind of represents what I really talked about in terms of studying about Japan from his college days. Hopefully you'll talk more about it when you speak, but I think he studied Japanese culture and art in university. I heard you've lived in Kyoto. I haven't lived in Kyoto, so you've done more than I have, and have also worked, have professional experience in your banking work in Tokyo. So really a kind of old friend of Japan from that perspective. Also, your family has long relationship with Japan, exemplified by the Tokyo department store in the New World Center in Kowloon, which I think for all of us who visited Hong Kong happens to be the place where we shop most of the time. So that deep relationship. Also, I think one of the things that is very exciting about Hong Kong-Japan relations going into the future is, whereas it started with and still is centered around trade and business, there are new areas in technology, arts, philanthropy areas where the relations are becoming broader. And Adrian encompasses many of those activities, and hopefully it will lead to more discussions of collaboration to come. So once again, on behalf of Asia Society Japan Center and International House Japan, I'd like to really thank everyone for being here. My final message is really about Asia Society Hong Kong, which is a deep, deep collaboration partner of Asia Society Japan Center. Actually, the idea of the Japan Center originated from some of the Hong Kong Center members. So we have a few godfathers and godmothers in Asia Society, but Ronald Chan was hugely instrumental in encouraging Japan to establish Asia Society Japan Center. It says a lot, I think, about Japan that we want to change. It's in some ways a disappointment that Japan did not have Asia Society Center. Like Japan was always part of Asia, but somewhat not part of Asia for a long time. And we really want to change that. We want to be an active contributor in the broader Asia discussions. And originally with Ronnie, but also with all the board members and the Secretariat of Hong Kong. It's probably been the one center where we've had the most collaboration in the past, but this is a kind of a marquee event to really celebrate that collaboration and to work together. So thank you so much for coming once again, and really excited to have this a meeting take place so that we can have more exchanges going forward. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Good afternoon, and it is an honor to stand before you today as the CEO of New World Development and founder of K11 Group. I'm delighted to be here in Japan, a place that holds a special spiritual connection for me since my young days. And during my college years, I had the privilege of immersing myself in Japanese heritage, culture, and traditions through a year-long exchange program in Kyoto. And the experience not only broadened my horizon, but also shaped my perspective in various aspects of life. After the reopening of the border, lots of people from Hong Kong have already visited or are visiting Japan, and apparently I'm one of them. And the excitement to explore Japan once again is widespread among Hong Kong residents. The bond between Japan and Hong Kong has a rich history that spans decades, and the influence of Japan's pop culture, encompassing anime, manga, fashion, and music, transcended borders and left an indelible mark not only in Hong Kong but across the globe. And similarly, Hong Kong's unique fusion of Eastern and Western influences and its vibrant film industry made a lasting cultural impact on Japan. And the reciprocal exchange of cultural elements has further deepened the connection between two regions. During the rise of Japan as a global economic powerhouse in the 1970s and the 80s, Japanese department stores thrived in Hong Kong, reflecting the growing connection between the two regions. And personally, the connections holds great significance for me, as it represents a continuation of a historical narrative that extends across generations within my family. We take immense pride in nurturing and strengthening the ties between Japan and Hong Kong. In the 1980s, we had the privilege of introducing the renowned Tokyo department store to Hong Kong at our Tsim Sha Tsui New World Center, a location that now has been transformed into an iconic Victoria Dockside project. And this significant step showcased our unwavering commitment to international collaboration and played a pivotal role in establishing a lasting relationship between Japanese craftsmanship and Hong Kong's consumers. And today, Japan and Hong Kong continue to enjoy a dynamic relationship, manifesting in various aspects of society and daily lives. Tourism, in particular, plays a significant role in fostering mutual understanding and cultural exchange. It is noteworthy that Japan has emerged as one of the most sought after destinations for Hong Kong tourists since the 90s. And Hong Kong ranks among the top four cities for inbound tourists into Japan. Equally important is the reciprocal flow of Japan tourists to Hong Kong. And the economic synergies between Japan and Hong Kong are also undeniable. The exchange of goods and services has reached unprecedented levels, fostering economic growth on both sides. In 2022, Japan ranked as Hong Kong's sixth largest trading partners, with Hong Kong's export to Japan showing remarkable figures. And on the other hand, Japan's export to Hong Kong, especially in seafood products, were valued at 33 billion US dollar last year, with Hong Kong being Japan's second largest trading partner. As we emerge from the global pandemic, Japan and Hong Kong stand at the threshold of a new future in the global economy. While challenges lie ahead, they also bring forth numerous opportunities for astute entrepreneurs on both sides. Another area that holds tremendous potential is the startup industry. Japan possesses a thriving innovation ecosystem supported by cutting-edge technologies, world-class research institutions, and robust infrastructure. In recent years, thanks to government support, we have witnessed a rapid increase in the number of young entrepreneurs who differentiate and demonstrate innovative and entrepreneurial mindsets. With the right resources and support, these young entrepreneurs have the potential to expand their business rapidly and globally, much like their counterparts in the US, China, and also India. Collaboration with Hong Kong can undoubtedly forge a mutually beneficial relationship. Hong Kong, strategically positioned with financial expertise and the entrepreneurial spirit can act as a vital gateway for Japan young entrepreneurs to establish their presence on the global stage. Our government also has invested significant resources to transform Hong Kong into an innovation hub for the Greater Bay Area. Hong Kong, when discussing the government's effort to enhance Hong Kong's status as an innovation and economic hub, I would like to highlight Hong Kong's Academy for Wealth Legacy. As the chairman of this initiative under the Hong Kong Financial Service Department Council, I'm very privileged to be involved. The Academy recognizes the importance of nurturing talent in the family office sector. Our aim is to address the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead by offering training, facilitating knowledge exchange, and providing networking opportunities. We strive to support industry practitioners and the next generation of wealth owners in preserving family values, legacies, and wealth. Ultimately, our goal is to establish Hong Kong as a leading global hub for family offices. Japan's rich history has enabled the passage of family heritage and wealth through generations. As we look into the future, we anticipate various factors that will shape the landscape of global wealth management. One such factor is the emergence of Generation Z, who are now entering family businesses. The unique upbringing, interests, and ambitions will undoubtedly influence long-term strategy for family offices. It is also a crucial time for previous generation to develop succession plan that uphold family values and strengthen legacies. I extend a sincere invitation to Japanese families to collaborate with us in preserving their wealth for future generations. Hong Kong and Japan share a deep appreciation for heritage, tradition, and family values. And by working together, we can create a lasting impact and forge a prosperous future for generations to come. And Japan and Hong Kong can forge an even stronger partnership rooted in innovation and also cooperation. By capitalizing on our respective strengths, we can create a more vibrant and prosperous future for both regions. I look forward to witnessing the remarkable collaborations and achievement that will emerge from our shared aspirations. Thank you.
Adrian, sorry, I have to ask, what did you study in Kyoto?
So I actually studied 6 months in Kyoto, and it was basically under a Stanford. I was studying at Harvard at that time,
Yeah.
but I joined the Stanford program
Yep.
for Japan studies for 6 months.
Yep.
And we study everything from Japanese culture, Japanese economy, Japanese philosophy. So everything that's around about Japan that give you a more 360 perspective of what's going on, from history, philosophy to the economy, economics, to language, to culture, and everything. Yeah.
Do you remember as a young man, what was the thing that struck you the most?
I think struck me most when I was younger, was that, and I think it's quite different from now. Is that back then I think Kyoto was very conservative. I think overall the Japanese system was very conservative, and that struck me the most. It was very conservative, and there are more rules than now.
Right.
Yeah, so I see the evolution of how Japan evolved to become more global now. Back then, I think it was very Japanese. Yeah.
It's actually very interesting because, Kyoto actually has this slogan, Kyoto dakara dekiru, right? Because it's Kyoto, we can get things done. So if you and I want to hold a fun event for our company in a Kyoto temple or in a Kyoto shrine or even in the mayor's office, we can actually rent that place. While here in Tokyo, that's like pulling teeth, right? It's very conservative here. Now, you were a young man. You still are a young man. For, you talked a little bit about entrepreneurship. You talked a little bit about the creation of prosperity, right? What advice would you give to a young Japanese, right? There's a lot of talk, oh, you must study engineering, you must do STEM, etc., etc. Your background is slightly different. What advice would you give to a young, ambitious Japanese young man or young woman?
I think, as I said, 20 years ago in Japan and 20 years later, I think the difference is that it's more open-minded and more entrepreneurial. So for young generation back then, they either go for a full job or they do arubaito. There's no one who's venturing out or thinking globally, nor were they thinking about starting their own business or going to venture 20 years ago. But I felt like now then it's 20 years ago, so this is the new generation. Um, so the generation now seem to have much more opportunities to start up their their venture and their companies and also disrupt the market because the system for Japan has been quite many decades.
Yeah.
So it's good to disrupt it a little bit practically and slowly. So when you can disrupt a market, you have gaps that you can tap into. So it can create markets, it can create businesses if you can change slowly. So I think for young people, if you're entrepreneurial enough, you're able to create your own venture that can tap into some of the gaps in the market. Sometimes you can disrupt it. Sometimes you can change it a little bit on the system, and which I don't think you can do it 20 years ago. So I think that's a good opportunity. However, these days people are more competitive, the generations. So you need more resources. So I think more entrepreneurial. I think more resource hunting, it's important in order for you to become an entrepreneur. Yeah.
So just to back up Adrian's point, it's very interesting that over the last 6-7 years, you actually find that 1 in 4 graduates of Tokyo University, right, quits his or her first job. And I think 20 years ago that would have been that type of labor mobility would just not be there. Now, that was the advice to a Japanese person. Now, what about the advice to somebody ambitious from Hong Kong?
That's a tough question.
Start a Japanese restaurant.
From Hong Kong, who's living in Japan or living in Hong Kong?
No, living in Hong Kong, growing up, living in Hong Kong, wanting to make a career.
Okay. I think for Hong Kong, I think same. I think the new generation has more. They're more creative. They're more ideas. For people who has more entrepreneurial spirit in Hong Kong, I think they should also look into Greater Bay Area because that's a 70 million people market. And also they literally look at regionally to Asia as well. So if I were them, I would venture out to start the business, maybe looking at Greater Bay Area as a market. So starting from Hong Kong, but then the market can be the Greater Bay Area, or starting from Hong Kong, you can have a business plan that can expand outside to Asia. Yeah.
I mean, I think many of you are familiar with the Greater Bay Area initiative there. This is basically integrating, and there will be, effectively 75 million people. I mean, remember, the greater Tokyo area is still the largest agglomeration. It's about 38 million people. So this will be twice the size with excellent infrastructure. Are you sort of doing any specific maneuvers with your businesses
We
there?
are very big in Greater Bay Area. We have been in the Greater Bay Area since 1982. So we have been into the market for a long time. So we're expertise and we're very familiar with it. I think for Japanese entrepreneurs, one more point I want to add is the cooperation between Japan and Hong Kong is that you can use Hong Kong as a springboard towards the Greater Bay Area, which is 70 million people, and 70 million people accounting for 5% of the China population, 13% of the GDP of China, and it's basically the growth engine of China. Or you can use Hong Kong to go to Asia as well. So Hong Kong is a springboard and also a melting pot and a hub for you to really becomes a bridge and connecting with Asia or the Greater Bay Area. That's one point. Secondly, I think there's two areas that you can think about is going to Hong Kong to expand your family offices, which I just mentioned. And I think the Hong Kong government has promoted a lot of policies to become very family office friendly. So if you want to diversify from Japan in family offices, Hong Kong would be great. Secondly, Hong Kong also are promoting virtual assets license. So from virtual assets exchange, securitized tokens, crypto exchange, stable coins, these are licenses that they're already issuing in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong will be, I think, the crypto hub and the virtual asset hub in Asia. So if anyone who's young people, entrepreneur who want to be in a licensed, regulated environment in the crypto market, in the STO market, the token markets, Hong Kong will be the best place to be. And I think what I just mentioned is kind of new industries that the young people may be looking into as well. Hong Kong also are promoting AI data, also looking at renewable energies and all these as a hub as well. So that is something they also are promoting. So I think for that connection, I think aside from the seafood exports, I think there's more that Japan and Hong Kong can connect with.
I mean, it's actually quite incredible when you see, what actually is going on there under the rule of law, and you do have the hokosei, you do have the direction very, very clearly laid out with technology parts, with universities, right? So there's a lot of purchasing power, that's going to be unleashed, right, from that nexus there. Now, let me ask you, if this development goes well, then Hong Kong is going to be like Shibuya. Right? I mean, because there's all this other stuff that happens, right? And it's going to be very exciting and with great infrastructure. I mean, is the role of Hong Kong going to get stronger, or is the role of Hong Kong sort of going to be surpassed by the GBA?
No, I think Hong Kong will be this. It's basically a connection, bridge, a gateway, and a springboard.
Yep.
So Hong Kong is very small, right? But I think the infrastructure will be facilitating a lot of cooperation with Japan, so that they can become the springboard into the Greater Bay Area or into Asia. It'll be good to jumpstart from Hong Kong because of the regulatory environment on different sectors. And I think a lot of the policies that I just mentioned was since last year or 2 years ago.
Right.
So it was very, very new. So for example, if you talk about the virtual asset market, it's a global market.
Right.
Okay, you want something licensed, you want something regulated, Hong Kong, not Japan. So you can use Hong Kong to do that, to become that, and vice versa. Hong Kong can also invest in Japan in other stuff like tourism, real estate, IPs, technology, advanced technologies. So I think these are also what Japan can offer to entrepreneurs or people from Asia to invest into.
Adrian, I'm gonna have to ask. There's these geostrategic, geopolitical realities, right? There's a lot of concern about this. There's a lot of noise about this, and we were just chatting, right? I mean, who knows in a year's time? Who knows who's going to run America? Right? It'll be after the election, so it's game up. But like you and I, you are an entrepreneur, you're an investor, sort of talk to me about how you and your family businesses, how do they navigate these geostrategic things, as much as you can say?
We of course, diversification is very important. So we have investments in Singapore, we have investment in Europe, we have investment in, of course, in Greater China as well. And diversifying into Japan is also something that can be an option as well. I think Japan has a lot of opportunities, especially in tourism. I think there's still a lot of growth in tourism, in budget hotels, if the price is right, there's a lot of good investment and deals in Japan that can be, and because of, the currency is it's also very favorable. So there's a lot of good points that makes Japan a very, very investment friendly place.
Do you find that sort of, for you to build the nexus here in Japan? I mean, it used to be sort of very dominated, by large corporations, by the large conglomerates, by the major players in industry. I mean, how do you go about sort of finding those entrepreneurial Japanese to connect and build the bridge into the future generation of entrepreneurs?
I think I'm still reconnecting back with Japan. So I think this question, I don't have a full answer because I'm still exploring. So I think today is a good start to open up this topic. I still need to reconnect back because I haven't been back for 5-6 years to Japan. I think I just got this is my second time since the border opens. Yeah, so I think and when I see Japan, I see that it's totally different. I see the new generation coming up. I see new opportunities coming, springing up as well. But I still need to explore it a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, which is sort of the topic, and I think we'll get to in the following panels. We'll explore in detail there. There are deep, long-standing family connections, right? But then there's also sort of a new generation, right, that is starting to increase, and you do sense that whether you look at Japanese science universities, whether you look at undergraduate programs, whether you look at the Japanese, cooking scene, for example, right? There's a lot more exchange, right, between Hong Kong and Japan than sort of meets the eye, right? Would you want to live back in Kyoto? The answer is yes. You're hesitant.
Yeah, I'm hesitant.
What makes you hesitant?
I don't know. I think I've changed 20 years later, a little bit. So I think about it because I need to explore a little bit more of different cities in Japan. Japan has totally changed, even for the past 5 years. I think it has changed so much. So the vibe is different. The people are different. The energy is different. How people dress is different. And so it's just totally changed. So I'm clueless, to be honest, at this point. So I'll answer your question like a year later. Yes.
No, I mean, I hope that maybe this conference can be a sort of a good starting point, right? For you to come more frequently, and the audience. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand.
Hi, Dr. Cheng. I'm Jerry Black. I'm with Eon Group here in Japan. Thank you for your comments. It's very interesting to me. I was curious about this intersection of family offices and ventures and entrepreneurship, and really how it gets to the heart of the IPO environment in Hong Kong. Because with tech founders, even way back to Alibaba in 2013, we've always had this constraint and this friction between tech founders wanting to have super shares and extraordinary voting rights, where Hong Kong has always had the one vote, one share, one vote law, which has. I remember asking Jack Ma in July of 2013, why he wanted to why he was not listing in Hong Kong, and he explained this to me, that he wanted the founders to be able to control the future board. So, what are your thoughts about this direction, number one? And number two, do you think it's a perceived or real constraint, or do you think that Hong Kong has room to move on this from an IPO perspective?
From the IPO perspective, I don't know exactly the details of the policies, but I know that they're opening up on and relaxing some of the policies so that they're allowing, for example, bioscience, biotech companies to list, and also tech companies as well. So they're actually relaxing. I think they're opening up. So I think, it's getting more they're more welcoming towards tech companies. And as you said, this is 2013. That's 10 years ago. So I think 10 years later, I think the entire regime has changed.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Glenn, Please. I was gonna add on. I mean, basically, in the world of finance, I mean, Hong Kong is, it's the rule of law is rigorously applied, right? And they're not innovating for the sake of innovating, but they adhere by the old rules, right?
I'm Glenn Fukushima. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and therefore I have to ask this question. Being in Washington, there's a tremendous amount of discussion about China, including Hong Kong and Taiwan. But there's a really wide-ranging, I would say, a huge range of views about the future of China. And I'd like to ask you, someone who works in Hong Kong and is watching the situation in China very closely, what is your assessment of the 5 to 10 year economic outlook in China? I mean, there are some who argue that the problems are so severe that it's going to result in a major slowdown, perhaps some political unrest, and that India is going to be a much more important player than China. And there are others who argue, no, these problems in China are just short term and they'll be dealt with, and that China will emerge as stronger than before, overtake the United States in GDP, and will be the leader in, at least in Asia. What is your perspective on this? Thank you.
My perspective is this. China is big. The market is big. Okay, there's 1.4 billion people. Okay, so I think if you generalize it, I think it's not fair. Okay, but if you segment it into different segments and parts, you see that there are many sectors are still making money, a lot. And some of them are not doing that well. China has, like everything, like different sector, different countries go through, it's an emerging country. So you have to go through cycles, right? So the first question is, what investment horizon you're talking about? Are you talking about 5-year investment horizon? You're talking a 10-year investment horizon? If you're talking about a 10-year investment horizon, I'm sure you definitely have to invest in China. And now is the best time. Okay? If you're talking about 2 years or 1 year, I don't know. Okay? Honestly, I don't know. So it really depends on your time frame. If you're betting on China and you're talking about 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, invest now. Okay? This is the best time. Okay? When all the media is talking blah, 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 China, you should invest in China. Okay? I mean, that's not a contrarian view. It's a logic. Okay? That's number one. So what is your time frame, your investment horizon? If you just want to flip, okay, sorry, I don't have a magic ball to predict what's happening in the next 6 months or 1 year. But I can tell you, you cannot miss China. It's the second largest now, I think, second largest economy in the world. You cannot miss that. Secondly, from my facts, okay, from my company, we're doing real estate in Greater Bay Area and also in Hangzhou. We sold last year during just COVID, we sold $1 billion in 1 day because we're selling the upper middle high-end market. Okay, we sold 4.2 billion renminbi in July, August, and September in Greater Bay Area, beating our budget and forecast. And now we already sold up to 6.2 billion renminbi in the Greater Bay Area, in Guangzhou, in Shenzhen, the big cities. Okay, why? First, we don't have too many competitors now. Secondly, we sell the upper high-end market, which there's still a lot of rich people in China who has, if you look at the data and the statistics, the deposit rate increased in China, right? The deposit, not deposit rate, the deposit percentage of population increased in China. So which means there's a lot of money in the banks. So what they're going to buy is quality products, high-end quality products, branded ones, because we have been in China since 1982, so close to 41 years. So these are, so really, you look at China, you cannot generalize it too much. And you have to understand whether you have the conviction in looking into China. But if you ask me for my statistics, we're doing very well because we sell products at a certain segment, right? There's some other sectors that are doing very well, right? EV, bad batteries, storages, renewable energies, new energy, which is which is the policies that China is promoting right now. So they are doing very well. So some sectors are not doing well, definitely. When people say property, they ask me, most of the properties are not doing well. But I told them, the peers in China, they focus on second, third, fourth tier cities. We focus on first tier cities. They sell mass and mass or lower middle types of properties. We sell high end, upper, but we're doing very well. So I think you need to really analyze China deeply to understand which gap, which segment, which market to tap, and then you will make money. For now.
Is Hong Kong a good hub? I mean, you're going to say yes, but I mean, sort of, if you could start from scratch, right? And you say this is a great time to invest in China, right? Is Hong Kong the place, or should I go to Shanghai?
Depends on what sector you're talking about.
Okay. You want to go to Kyoto?
Depends on what sector you're talking about. Yeah. So it's different. It's greater, when I'm talking about Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong is part of the Greater Bay Area. So it includes Hong Kong too.
No, it's interesting. I was just in Hong Kong, and it's just amazing the ease of the way that you go back and forth, right? And you can complain about the facial recognition, but it just makes the border crossing. It's just so easy, right, to actually get it done. Nick.
Jesper, hi. Thanks. Thanks, Adrian, for an excellent presentation. I just wanted to add a comment on the back of the question about China, India. Jesper and I were here a little while ago for a real estate conference, and we had a fantastic presentation from a professor from Singapore. And he took a similar question. He put the relationship in, I think, very good context. So if you assume that China GDP grows at 4% a year for the foreseeable future, if you apply 7% even to India, it'll take 80 years for India to catch up in terms of the total size of the economy. There's no comparison. There's no depth between the two. I think it's a distraction to compare the two. But on a more positive note, as Adrian was saying, I think for investors who can put geopolitics on one side and actually look at the reality of the economies, now is probably a generational opportunity to invest in Hong Kong and tier one cities in China. And therefore, for the context of this group here, probably this is the ideal opportunity for Japanese companies to take a look at Hong Kong. What can they bring to Hong Kong that we don't have in real estate, design? It's probably the best opportunity, really, for a very long time to come.
No, I totally agree. I think for Japanese companies, you should use Hong Kong, whether you want to establish a family office, using Hong Kong as a springboard or a connection to the Greater Bay Area, and establish a foundation right now. This is the best timing to do it, because then I think the reason why is, I think after the pandemic, everyone is reconnecting with each other, and everyone's really creating bonds, and everyone wants the connection. China wants a connection with the world. Japan probably wants connection with someone. Hong Kong wants connection with everyone. Everyone wants connections. So now everyone is trying to build bonds, and the fact that you reach out a hand to build the bond, it will solidify the foundation as quickly as possible and more effectively at this time. And if you're looking into investing into China, build the bond now through Hong Kong, and you will and the return you will get back the return definitely in the future. I don't know how many years, but depending on your time horizon. But I really think this is the best time to secure a good foundation and good bond. And then more policies, more friendly policies are relaxing, and this is the great time.
So this is an online question, and this person asks, thank you for your speech. Can you give us more details on how New World is involved in the family office business?
New World is not involved in the family office business. The World Legacy Institute was a personal appointment by the Hong Kong government, which we helps trying to help family office around the world to go into Hong Kong and connecting with the Greater Bay Area or to China. So this is not involved. There's no relationship with the New World.
Great, thank you. And Adrian, you've shared us with some photographs. Can we show the photographs, and can you explain some of the photographs that you showed us?
Okay. Also, so this is the New World Center in the 1980s, and I think they did a Lego. Yeah, can you show the Tokyo department store one? This is not the another one, the next one, I think. Yeah. Oh, this is the Tokyo department store. So that's the first, since 1979 and 1980s, Japan was, as I said, Japanese department store, Japanese consumerism, Japanese singing, Japanese entertainment was very hot. So actually, my grandfather brought the first Tokyo department store. At that time, department store is like the hottest thing ever. I don't know about now, but at that time, it's like the coolest shopping destination. And Tokyo department store, it's supposed to be a very, very famous department store. And then we brought it into Hong Kong. And yeah, so these are some pictures that showcase our tie with Japan since 1979.
So this is you driving.
No, I wish. Yes. Oh, this is department.
This is you climbing.
See, Tokyo, Tokyo department store. Yeah. Yep. That's this is probably late 1980s.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. You're an entrepreneur based in Tokyo, French entrepreneur. My question is about, so we talked about like how China is actually an attractive investment destination despite like the current, let's say, atmosphere in the Western media. The same thing happens for Japan in a sense, at least what I saw when I was living in the States and in France, is always like very gloomy and negative articles about Japan's economy and future, about the decreasing population and stagnating economy. What do you think is, like, first of all, like from Hong Kong's perspective, what is the image of Japan as an economy and as a potentially a powerhouse for Asia's future? And second of all, what is your personal vision of Japan in the future? Like, do you think it's going to be able to continue to contribute on as many levels as it used to be in the 90s and 80s, or do you think its role is going to keep decreasing because obviously its population is not as the volume is not as much as China or India, and in that sense, what do you think will Japan, despite a lower a footprint in terms of volume, what do you think Japan will still be able to bring to the region as a whole in the future?
I think what happens in Japan is, this is a question for me too, is about the venture and the startup world. I need to explore that a bit more. But I think the new generation should create more value through ventures and also to entrepreneurships, right? I think the system for Japan it's great, but we need a lot of energy, new energy to be in the system. Okay, that's basically through entrepreneurship, creativity. So that I don't know. I have to check. I think for investments, a lot of people are trying to, especially tourism, is something I think will be quite big and will be bigger. You have the Osaka Expo. You have different types of events coming up. So I think Japan is still going to be in tourism, going to be very hot. So that's why I said budget hotels and anything related to tourism will be something that foreign investments will be quite interested. But I think Japan will be attracting a lot of foreign money coming into Japan because it's more relaxed. I think they open up a little bit. However, Japan still has a lot of competitive edge. For example, IPs, technologies, all these, or even consumerism. Some retailers. So if they can open up their IPs, they can open a little bit more on the technology side, and they can share and JV with people. Then I think that will be a very big business. Now it's still very protective, right? And if they can open it just a little bit and let people JV together to do it in Asia or do something else, I think that will also be something. It will be quite a good business model.
Adrian, fantastic. Our time is up. Thank you so much for being candid, for being frank. I mean, these are, not just interesting time, they're challenging times, but they're times of great opportunity. And personally, I very much agree with Adrian that, there's a very contrarian moment right now. We can argue about the geostrategic layouts. There's obviously significant differences between Japan over the last 20 years and Hong Kong today and China today, because the regime uncertainty and the potential for regime crackdown, on individual freedoms, is a risk, that one does have to take into consideration, which I think was much less of an issue here in Japan. But still, I think the engagement, the communication, reconnecting, and creating a shared future. Hong Kong and Japan have a very proud history of doing that, a very successful history of doing that, and I hope that this conference can be a little bit of a catalyst, to get the next generation, so that we can actually have shared prosperity and a shared future with all of us. So, Adrian, in that spirit, thank you very much, and I see you in Kyoto.
So great. Well, I think we had a wonderful introduction by Adrian Wong on all the business opportunities, and now we're going to hear from each of the experts. So let me start. I think we're just going to go in the order. You're sitting on the stage, so Ken, you're going to have to kick us off. So you have your responsibilities at Lenovo currently, I think, which is partly to transform it as an IT company to from away from PC. So I'd like if you could do your self-introduction talking about that. And I think what's fascinating is you were chairman of NEC Lenovo Japan, as well as Fujitsu Client Computing from 2016 to 21. So now you step down as chairman, but you serve on the board. So I think you have a very unique perspective running a sort of China-based company, living in Hong Kong, but also having that Japan perspective from running a business and now being a director. So if you could sort of talk to us about your personal ties and your company experience, so we can then learn more about some of your strategic opportunities, that would be great.
Hey, thank you, Jenifer, and thanks Asia Society for having me here. So once again, my name is Ken. I run the Solution and Services Business Group for Lenovo on a global basis. I think for most of you, the more well-known part of Lenovo is we are a PC company, right? Because we have been having the #1 market share for many, many years. But indeed, we have started our service-led transformation back then a couple of years ago. And just about 2 years ago, we reorganized our company into 3 business groups, and now I'm running one of them. A few things, right? So before this role, I was the president of Asia Pacific Lenovo, and I was asked to expand the business in Japan. And that was the time when we started the first joint venture with NEC back then, 2011. It was so successful, we can talk about this later. And then later on, in 2017, we actually did another joint venture with Fujitsu on the PC part, right? So today, 2 out of 5 PC in Japan that we're selling today, regardless whether on a commercial side or you see in a Yamada Denki, Yodobashi, or big camera, 2 out of 5 is actually coming out from the Lenovo group. We have a sizable operation here. We have about 4,000 people. Last time when I count, we have 3 factories here in Japan actually, and 1 R&D center which is in Yokohama. And that R&D center is not just for the local market. That R&D center is also for our international markets. Right. So I used to spend a lot of time in Japan, as you can imagine, because this is one of our biggest market. Some of you might be a jaw-dropping moment of Lenovo because we're well known not just on PC, we're well known as a company coming out from China, but today only 25% of our revenue are actually coming from China. 75% of our revenue are actually coming out from outside mainland China, and Japan is one of our biggest markets. I used to spend 50% of my time here. I do not speak Japanese as good as like a lot of the speaker that you're gonna interact with today. But I also have a little bit tie with Japan back into my teenager days. I actually studied Japanese when I was like 15 years old, many years ago. Not because of business, because I just like the culture. I still remember there are a couple of like superstar that I still remember, like Miho Nakayama and Noriko Saiko. So those are the good heydays, right? So don't talk to my wife Amy when you see her, right? Because this is Ken Wong reserve matter. So this is a little bit about myself.
Thank you. And we'll turn back to some of your experience in Japan in a bit, but I want to turn now to Kenzo. So Kenzo, I think you have a very unique perspective. You're currently CEO of Corns & Company, which was founded in 1861 in Japan. So that's 7 years before the Meiji Restoration. So while we heard earlier about how Japan is changing, the length of some of the longevity of some of the companies don't change. But you also have such a fascinating cross-cultural background, raised in Hong Kong, working here. And so I think what we'd like to hear from is, what is your sort of the personal ties and how have you utilized them, and what is your background relative to having been, having had that experience, and how has that affected your success in your company vision?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm very honored to be here talking to you not about cars, because usually the only thing I talk about is cars.
We'll get to that.
So I guess I was like, well, why have I been invited to speak at this event if it's not about cars? And think it's really about, maybe I can share more of my personal experience. And really, I think I am almost a product of many decades of Hong Kong and Japan cooperation. Corns & Company was founded in 1861 by an Englishman named Frederick Corns. But we talk about trade between Japan and England at the time, or Japan and the British Empire at the time. But really, in 1861, that was not the case. The case was between Hong Kong and Japan, because we were country trade. And still, this is very much several years after the end of the Raj, end of the East Asian Indian Company. And like the local traders in Hong Kong, Jardine Matheson, Swire, Corns was the very end of that between Hong Kong and Japan. So really, the history of the company begins there. Some of that business, it began with tea and silk, as is always the case, but also some of that business we still do today. So, for example, we were the first company in Japan to sell insurance, and that was to insure through Lloyd's the shipments from here to Japan, so from here to Hong Kong and onwards to the UK, and we still have an insurance agency today. So there's the history on the corporate side of things. On the personal side of things, my grandfather, who YK Pao, who maybe some of you may know, was a very big shipping magnate in Hong Kong after the war and throughout the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. He partook very heavily in the Shikumisen scheme, which I think some of you who know the history of Japanese shipping may have heard of. And this was a scheme from the Japanese government, in fact, to encourage overseas investors through financing to purchase ships in Japan and build ships in Japan in the yards. This is post-war Japan, and then use them to charter them to Japanese companies to power Japanese trade, the growth of Japanese trade during the 70s, 60s, and 70s. This is actually a very big part of where my family comes from. And during the 80s, he purchased Wheelock Martin and Under That Corns. My father is Japanese. He's actually from Amami Oshima, and he's really a country boy. He grew up in a single parent household in post-war Japan, which is quite difficult from a quite I wouldn't underprivileged background at the time. His connection to Hong Kong is my grandmother took a American as a second husband, and my father got into a motorcycle accident, scooter accident in his teens, and got a bone marrow, very serious bone marrow infection that was not curable in Japan at the time. I guess his stepfather brought him to Hong Kong for treatment, and from there ended up in international school and then off to the United States, where he met my mother as hippies. He burnt down his ROTC center. And you have a hippie Japanese guy and a hippie Hong Kong lady who got married in the 70s. And then that's my personal background. And so really, I am very much from three different angles, a product of decades of Hong Kong and Japanese cooperation.
So, well, we'll have to come back to when you got into the luxury car business. We'll do that in a minute. But wow, with that, you kind of crossed all the cultural aspects. So we'll be fascinated to hear about how that impacts the business. So for turning over to Janzen, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing some of your goods from Four Seasons. Pick them up outside if you haven't yet. But you have a very unique background running both huge companies and being a director, I think, on both, in Hong Kong for the Four Seasons Group, and also being president of Miyata here as well as for food distribution. So can you share with us, this has been a business, Four Seasons, for 50 years. You have a very broad experience, and yet you now have a distribution company in Japan. So what has been the driver for you to make that Japanese acquisition? What's your kind of business background and driver and involvement with both Japan and Hong Kong?
Thank you, Jenifer, and thank you, Asian Society, for having me here. Perhaps let me share a bit background of Four Seas Group first. So Four Seas Group is founded in 1971 by my father, Mr. Stephen Tai. So he's the first person to bring Japanese confectionery products to China and Hong Kong. At that time, there's no Japanese confectionery products in Greater China. So the first product that he brought into Hong Kong market was Glico, the Isaki Glico, the Pretz and the Pocky. So that was first launched in Hong Kong market. And then later in the 1970s, 1980s, we brought in Calbee, potato chips, Meiji, Lotte, and many other brands to Hong Kong market and China market as well. So we got listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 1993. So that was pretty much the time that we have to, really diversify our business a little bit. So rather than just being a, agency for these brands, being the sole agent of them, we actually work with them, joint venture with them, to build factories with them, with our Japanese partners in the Greater China market. So at the moment, we have 20 factories in China and Hong Kong and Japan. So producing different kinds of confectionery products, like Calbee potato chips. We have a factory in Hong Kong and one in China. So for these products that made in Hong Kong Calbee factory, you can't find it in Japan. Yeah, it's totally different. It's localized. I mean, it's tailor made for Hong Kong customers. The taste. So then in 2000, we have our own other business, like retail business, restaurant business. So Four Seas is more like we do anything related to Japanese food in the Hong Kong market. So talking about Miyata, of course, Four Seas is sole agent with a lot of giant brands in Japan, like as I said, Calbee, Meiji, Lotte. But Miyata is a very special company. Miyata company was of course founded in Japan 90 years ago. So it is a top 10 confectionery wholesaler in Japan. So they have a lot of medium and smaller suppliers, confectionery suppliers in Japan. So over 700, yes. So the synergy effect that Four Seas Group and Miyata has was, we're managing to bring in a lot of smaller makers products to Hong Kong market and China market because they might not have the resources or connections to expand the business in Hong Kong before. But now that with the resources and the synergy effects of Four Seas Group and Miyata, we introduce these products to Hong Kong market as well.
Oh, no, it's great to hear about the synergy. And I think in the food industry, and we'll turn to this, but I think we came up with, the tourism ties, but I think of it mainly as food tourism with so many Hong Kong friends coming here to eat and vice versa. Let's go back to Ken, though, and talk a little bit about, technology is such a big topic. We've talked about startups, innovation. Japan's doing a lot of DX, but digitalization, but trying to catch up. But when we were talking earlier, I think, if we think about some of the pressures, that are in your group as you transform yourself to more of a solution company, one of the things we discussed was the demographics in Japan. I mean, we hear about AI, chat GPT, and how you were even mentioning in your line of work, how your day-to-day work is changing as AI empowers you to be more independent in what you do. So can you talk a little bit about that and maybe where you see some opportunities? You can speak more generally, but even in the aging space, how you see that the Lenovo helping and some of the synergies between Hong Kong and Japan that are both aging. How can you leverage technology for that purpose, and where are those strategic opportunities?
Well, that's a great and broad question indeed, right? If you look at the Lenovo portfolio today, so we have everything on the endpoint, right? We call it the intelligent devices. And we also have the infrastructure solution, right? Which starting from a very simple server sitting in your office to all the way the most complex high performance computing solution that Lenovo is providing today. I think some of the fact may be less well known to the people in this room is that Lenovo today is powering 8 out of the top 10 public cloud on the world in the East and in the West, right? And last but not least, I think my job is to putting all together these hardware and software and our expertise to create the desired outcome for our customers, right? And if I look back, I think in the past, not long ago, right, just 12 to 18 months, I think most of you in this room will agree with me. By far, the most popular and also challenging question is around AI, right, in specific Gen AI, and this is also the one of the area that we have spent a lot of time on. Earlier on, we have a little bit of chit chat session before we came in this room. I share a little bit of how this changed how I work as a person recently, right? So I used to have a 10 people team who are responsible for my communication on a worldwide basis, right? Because we're running a global business with 60 billion today US dollar on a global basis, operating in 180 plus markets, right? So we have a 10 people team just operate by LinkedIn, my internal external communication. Now, because of the Gen AI, right, I'm using Gen AI to generate about 30 to 40% of my personal speeches, right? Even today, the preparation is done by ChatGPT, right? And about another 30 to 40% of my PowerPoint, for example, that I need to deliver in a speech or in a similar setup, right? 30 to 40% of my PowerPoint today are created by autopilot, right? A technology that we partner deeply with Microsoft, right? So this is how AI and especially Gen AI is changing how people work. And even, right, I spend a lot of time in terms of creating customized application for our customer. And today, compared to traditional way of programming, there's at least about 30 to 40% productivity gain by using GenAI. Think about, right? The same team, the same people, right? They're gonna overnight increase their productivity by 30, 40%. That means your cost is gonna be more competitive by 30 to 40%, right? It's gonna get you a lot of businesses, right? In that perspective. Or on the flip side, if you're not able to grasp that, how uncompetitive you are, right? So I think, Jenifer and I talk about, like, there's a lot of things happening around us, right? Post COVID, and a lot of people are trying to create a crystal ball to think about what is going to happen next year, right? Is the GDP going to grow by 2%, 3%, 4%? But I think in our industry, there's one thing that is unique is the role of technology. Because when I talk to my customer, the more challenging the situation, the more headwind that a company faces, the more help they need from technology. Because technology is no longer a cost in your formula, right? The technology is actually an adder in your formula, right? That's why I think a lot of work that I have been working on has been working with our customer to see how can we help them to apply technology in order to help them to gain competitive edge.
No, and I think you had mentioned too that, with the aging population aspects, I think Japan is one of the places most open to that because it's really going to be a game changer, and Hong Kong's, also experiencing that. So that's a really important point, I think, for us to consider. So let's move now to Kenzo. We're going to get back to luxury cars because you're known for that. But I also think for me, when I think about a lot of the synergies between Hong Kong and Japan, you distribute Lamborghini, Bentley's luxury goods, right? And you had said that the pandemic turbocharged your business. And I see not only when I used to live in Hong Kong, IFC, we used to go to look at the parking lots, just count all the Bentleys, Rolls Royce, whatever was there. And now you can almost do that anywhere in Minato-ku as well. So what from your experience, where do you think, how do you see your luxury business brand going in Japan? And what do you think the kind of opportunities are to actually increase that in the future?
Thank you. Sorry, before we go there, can I ask Ken a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Did ChatGPT ask you to promote ChatGPT in your speech today?
That's a good question. That's a prompt engineering discussion that we're going to talk about in the dinner.
Sorry.
Good question.
So I think luxury cars have been very interesting in the last couple of years. If you go back to the beginning of COVID, I think, end of 19 and into the beginning of 20, because I think I have a little bit more international exposure. I live in Hong Kong than many of my management team. I was very much on the COVID-19 radar. That this is coming. This is going to be big, very early on. And I was trying to warn my management, force them to make plans. We were probably one of the only dealerships to shut down in about April of 2020. We were ready to make cuts, and this is going to be like 2009, 2011. Our showrooms were closed, and in the month of April 2020, we sold more cars than ever in the history of our company, out of the back door. So COVID has been amazing for luxury cars and luxury in general. Now you do see that coming down in some other countries, so we're wary today on the market, and also the price of cars have gone up significantly due to undersupply during the COVID era. But the most important thing, that metric we look at, is the difference between the used car values and the new car values, and right now they're still strong. So actually, the cost of ownership of a luxury vehicle today is quite low. Because the resale value is so high. This allows you to own a luxury car for really not an insignificantly more amount of money than a high-end BMW, which will devalue quite aggressively. So in terms of, I'd like to bring this to the Hong Kong Japanese side of things, but I've also developed a country club, a driving country club in Chiba. Some of you may have heard it, called Magarigawa. It's probably the only facility like it in the world. It is the most luxurious driving facility in the world. And of course, it's with Asia in mind. And I think Japan is the only place in Asia you can do something like this. It's sometimes living in Japan, we don't realize what we have in terms of natural resources. We don't realize that we can build an international length circuit in the mountains without noise issues, 1 hour from an international airport, 2 international airports. That's not possible anywhere else in the world. Somewhere we can have like good food, the cars are good, the quality is good, the road access is good. All of these things I feel like are underappreciated and undervalued in Japan. We're selling our memberships now at about 40 million yen, yonsenman. For a Japanese perspective, that's very expensive, but 90% of our members are Japanese. From a Hong Kong perspective, from a Chinese perspective, it's not as cheap. It's very cheap. It's like, whoa, that's, I don't understand how cheap that is when you come from a Hong Kong perspective, right? When you're paying triple that for a golf membership in Hong Kong. I think sometimes being in Japan and appreciating what we have here, we don't understand how good we have it and how much market value there is for Japan, whether it's just the food, the air, the weather. Our cars are better here. I mean, they're in better condition because the climate is better, because the maintenance is better, because we have a history of car servicing that you don't have in China or the rest of Asia, really, because the history is here. So Hong Kong people even love cars. They love cars more than Japanese people. It's crazy how much they love cars, even though they have no roads to drive their cars, right?
I thought they go out at night.
Yeah.
I think they go out at night.
Yeah. And so they all keep their cars in Germany and fly to Germany to drive their cars in Germany. I'm like, well, you should come here because our roads are better. Our asphalt is better. When you stop at a roadside restaurant in Japan, you get a great meal. You get great udon or ramen. When you stop in a roadside restaurant in Germany, you get Wiener Schnitzel. Again, yeah, sausages, yeah, bangers, yeah. So I really think there's opportunity for all sorts of tourism here, but also just I think I want to make a message today, say that Japan's so great, and we don't realize it until maybe you go to China and you ride the Shinkansen, the high-speed train from Beijing to Shanghai, and you look out the window for 5 hours and see nothing but Saitama. Sorry, that was a terrible joke. For hours and hours and hours, and realize that to be able to see green, to be able to drink fresh milk, it's just a wonderful thing that you can experience here, and that we should be proud of that, and be happy to share it. Right? Thank you.
Thanks so much. I mean, I think the car synergy is a great one, and now with the weaker yen, I think you're going to have a lot more probably Chinese coming to experience your driving area. So turning now to Janzen, I think I'm going to ask you some sort of tough questions, because I think sitting sort of where I do on one board that has that imports a lot of food, we've seen the discussion now after the pandemic around food distribution. You've got more and more food security issues, much more localization pressures, supply chain disruptions probably been the biggest in your area. And now that you have kind of a food business here, Miyata, you're doing more, import export. I'm just interested in hearing about what you think the challenges are. In particular, I know that we've recently had the nuclear wastewater release issue with Fukushima. And so there's been, I think, a ban on some of the seafood. We know seafood's one of the biggest exports from Japan. So I think that's hopefully a shorter term than a longer term challenge. But if you can talk a little bit about, with your experience between the two countries and also in the board level, et cetera, are you seeing a big business model change? And what are you seeing for the future for your businesses?
Hong Kong is still the second largest region in the world in terms of Japanese food exports. So having said that, that is for consecutive years. We used to be number one, so the biggest importer of Japanese food. For Hong Kong, a 7 million population city, that is huge. So then mainland China takes up the first spot, and then we're now the second. But that represents how much Hong Kong people love Japanese food. The Japanese food DNA is in Hong Kong people's mind. in such a small city, we have over 2,000 Japanese restaurants. Yes. If you go to any convenience stores, any supermarkets, actually, you find all kind of Japanese products. So that represents how much we like Japanese food, and so even, for example, for the recent Fukushima Alps water topic, actually, these few months, thanks to the effort from Japan government and Hong Kong government, everything is going very smooth. We have radiation checks from FEHD, the Food Environmental Hygiene Department of Hong Kong. So all the radiation checks, it's smooth. I mean, there's no failure cases from that. So Hong Kong people loves it, and we trust, and Hong Kong people trust the food safety and hygiene of Japanese products. So that is the key. And having said that, because you see how many Hong Kong people comes to Japan, eating, enjoying. If you walk down Ginza these few days, you see a lot of Hong Kong people as well. Yeah. But of course, we know Japanese food culture. We respect Japanese food culture. Hong Kong people actually, they know about the culture here. So in terms of on the commercial side, because we have a lot of products already, so we have to further diversify our product categories from Japan, not only looking at mainstream food products in Japan, or that we used to mainly source from Tokyo, but now we source food and other products from different areas of Japan as well. Yeah, so for example, we import a lot from Hokkaido, we import a lot from South Japan. I myself, I went to Hokkaido this July. I had a MOU signed with the Hokkaido government to help and assist in promoting more Hokkaido products to Hong Kong, which we've been trying to. So yeah, I have a strong confidence on Japanese food to further grow in Hong Kong market.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting that, there's a new door opening now for more kind of, less Tokyo specific exports and more regionalization around Japan, kind of touching a broader range. So that's also good for Japan, as well as hopefully more people in Hong Kong will be excited about the differentiating factor. So I know we need to leave some time for questions coming up. So I am going to ask one more question of each of our panelists. So Ken, I think, you fly back and forth a lot. You've had a lot of experience here. You spend 50% of your time here. What are you thinking about from your perspective as the kind of opportunity and challenge you see in your industry for more business between Japan and Hong Kong? Are there certain segments of your business you're focusing on? Where do you see that, or is there anything you'd like to sort of add from your unique perspective to the audience today?
Well, I think lots of opportunities, especially in our sector. I think earlier on, Adrian talked about Greater Bay Area, right? And I'm a big fan of it, right? Not because I'm a Hong Konger, but I'm looking from a business perspective. I think some of the number that we share, some of them, like 86 million population in Greater Bay Area. This is 7 cities plus 2 special administration region, which is Hong Kong and Macau, right? 86 million people. It's how many people? It's about 70% of the whole Japan, right? If you look at the GBA, GDP is about 1.7 trillion US dollar. This is about 20% of the whole Japan GDP on an annual basis. And last but not least, the Greater Bay Area, how big is it? It's 56,000 square kilometer. This is about 14% of the whole Japan area, right? So adding them all together, I think there are 2 key messages. One is there are huge opportunity, and Hong Kong can play a key role for the Japan investment to get into a bigger business opportunity. Number 2 is when you look at the ratio, right? I can show you later, but that means there will be a lot of growth, right? Because this is debatably the richest part of China, right? Now, the next question, you might ask me some of the examples, right? Can you give me some example? This is too broad, too high level, too whatever, right? One of my partner, NEC, has a collaboration with the Hong Kong Polytechnic University in looking at robotics, the R&D robotics for the elderly and the caregiving services. Because I think what we share in common in Hong Kong and in Japan is an aging population, right? We all face the aging population challenges, and we have a lot of subject matter expertise in Hong Kong and also in Japan. So when we work together, right, and try to address a Greater Bay Area opportunity, and I can guarantee you this is huge. The second thing that I would suggest and share is smart manufacturing, which is a big investment in Lenovo. So we are working to build a couple of net zero factories in China. Actually, I did one in Shenzhen. I just did another one in November in Tianjin, and that one is the first in China that is certified by the China government as carbon neutral. First in China across all industry, and that project is done by Lenovo Group, and also leveraging our R&D center in Japan, because we have 3 factories here. There's a lot of great subject matter expertise that we can bring forward for us to build that in China. And Lenovo is not alone. I think there are a lot of smart manufacturing requirements in China. And last but not least, right, what I would like to save some time is AI. There are a lot of AI opportunity. I think Kenzo will challenge me again. Ken, you're promoting ChatGPT again. Let me tell you one thing that is non-ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a US-based technology, right, coming out from OpenAI. But actually, a lot of our customer is looking at localized large language model in Japan, in Hong Kong, and also in GBA. So I think this is another area where we can put the best of Japan and Hong Kong and try to capture a bigger opportunity around the Greater Bay Area. So 3 things.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for bringing up sustainability and kind of the green related cooperation. I think that's one of the main interests of all companies. And if we can do more of that between, Japan and Hong Kong and China, I think that's a win-win. So turning back to you, Kenzo, and I don't know if you want to make any comment on AI, but your company, Corns and Company, is not just a luxury brand company. You have an insurance agent, or insurance business. You also have technology services. So you're based in Japan. From your unique perspective, covering a lot of different products, what are you facing as some of kind of the challenges in your business or opportunities? Where's your strategy going that you think could involve more of Japan and Hong Kong ties?
So we actually do some AI solutions. Quite an interesting one, in fact. We provide AI taste testing to Suntory and Ajinomoto and some of the other Japanese food manufacturers. And what it can do is it can predict how the American market will react to a certain drink product. So we can feed it the chemical formula of a drink. And the AI will tell you that an American will say it tastes too lemony or it's not sweet enough. The average American. So yeah, I'm not against it.
Collaboration.
Yeah, collaboration, yes. Let's see, in terms of, we do some business into China, specifically diamond CVD machines. These are machines for growing diamonds. If anyone wants a big diamond for their partner, let me know. I can get you a lab-grown diamond. And I think there's a lot of, I would say, controls coming out of the United States that are hard to work around. And honestly, from a business perspective, a little bit nonsensical. But it's business, and this is something Hong Kong is very good at, working around these issues. I get sushi in that comes from Tsukiji every day in Hong Kong, no problem. I don't ask any questions about how it got there. But I think Hong Kong is in fact a great place to come together and solve these kinds of problems in a world where I would say certain parties are trying to divide us and find ways to push us apart.
Let's finish with you, Janzen, before we turn it over to the Q&A. But you've talked about some of the opportunities for expanding your distribution of products around Japan. That some of the geopolitics haven't been won't be a long-term challenge. They're more of a short-term challenge. So what are you optimistic about wearing your hat at Miyata and as a sort of a food mogul, both here and in Hong Kong? Where do you feel the future is going, and what's your strategy around that aspect?
Firstly, I have to, I really agree with Ken. When we talk about, as a company, we have business in China, Hong Kong, and Japan. I mean, how we're going to have closer ties between Hong Kong and Japan is definitely on the Greater Bay Area matter as well. It is important because before the pandemic, I know there's been a lot of seminars in Tokyo, in Japan, talking about how Japanese entrepreneurs can go into the Greater Bay Area markets. A lot of them are my friends, and actually, they don't know too much details on really how to expand the business into the GBA. So Hong Kong is really the first place in their mind when they thought about GBA. Oh, let's expand our business in Hong Kong first, and then let's see how we can go into the Greater Bay Area market, which especially for food industry. Actually, Hong Kong, of course, GBA, we're Southern Chinese. We have this very similar eating habit, eating culture. So that is very important. When you think about expanding GBA, let's go into Hong Kong first. So for our business, of course, there is a lot of synergies which we've shared. Especially, we used to only bring Japanese products to Hong Kong and China market, but what we're now doing is actually Japanese like Hong Kong products as well. So what I'm doing is I'm planning to open a very reputable Chinese restaurant in Tokyo. I know a lot of friends in Japan, they love it. We have to localize in a Japanese way, Chinese cuisine, but then there must be a lot of mapo tofu. Yeah, but then yes, but we believe we should bring more Hong Kong Chinese products to Japan as well, and that is what Miyata is doing. Actually, for example, one category of confectionery, like chestnuts. Yeah, actually, Japan doesn't have a lot of chestnuts. We bring it from China, and the quality is very good. And we are selling in many different retail chains in Japan through Miyata, bringing from China to like Daiso and other retail chains. So we want to make this, food trading business, fights in mutual ways. Thank you.
That's great. No, I think it's really been very interesting too. We've had the food dynamic here talked about a lot, but I think about any Chinese wedding or Japanese wedding or any conversation between Japan and Hong Kong always comes back to food. So I definitely think there's more opportunities for your company and also for food tourism in the future. So anyway, I want to go ahead and turn it over to the Q&A.
Thank you, Jenifer. I'm Jerry Black. I'm with Eon Group. That's one role. So I have, Janzen, I know that in Hong Kong stores, we cannot get enough Japanese snacks and confectionery. So thank you very much. But my other role is I've been on the special committee overseeing the privatization of Toshiba. So I have a question for Ken. I found myself knee deep with CFIUS and FEFTA and nuclear and AI and quantum and all kinds of national defense issues. But my real question is for you, having one foot in Hong Kong, 1 foot in China, and the rest of your body, the rest of the world. How do you see this whole chip battle, AI battle, and technology battle going on? Do you see it's going to be bifurcated between China and allies and the rest of the world? And how do you think that's going to impact the growth of things like AGI and really advanced chip technology?
So I actually spend a lot of time. I actually spend very little as a percentage of my time in China, right? So most of my time actually outside China. For example, in November, in October, I spent a month in the States, right? Because inevitably, we have 180 markets that we need to manage. I think there are a few things, right? One is as a group, right? Lenovo as a group, wherever we're doing business, we comply 100%, if not 200%, to the local rules and regulations, right? And that's why we are able to operate in 180 markets plus. The second thing is, I didn't mention, we have 22 factories on a global basis and 18 R&D center, and most of them are actually outside China, right? The point here is we have a very diversified global supply chain and also R&D capability that help us to meet with the different rules and regulation coming out from different parts of the world. And I think regardless of whether you are in our business or in my friend's business here, you need the agility and resilience to navigate all these different challenges, right? I think semiconductor, this is definitely one of the hottest topic in the past few months. I can debate there are other hot topics, for example, data privacy, right? I think earlier on where we're talking about, every economy, every market is asking for a dedicated data center in order to host a public cloud, right? Australia, even Japan, Europe, and even some of the Southeast Asian countries, right? So that's part one, right? The world is going to be more interesting, right? The second is because of all these complexity. That's why when you look at the overall global IT services market, it's still growing at a relatively fast pace. Right? Global services market is growing at 8%, a lot faster than most of the GDP growth around the world. And there's only one reason, in my perspective, is customer needs help, right? They need the skills, they need people to help them with the complexity, the different requirement and tech stack at different part of the world, and they need people, a partner, an advisor like Lenovo to help them, right? So overall, I know there will be a lot of interesting thing that's going to happen, but I look at it as more on the opportunity side of the equation rather than the challenging side of the equation.
Thank you. I think it goes a lot to some of the challenges on the local. While we want to still be global, the local and the territorial nature of some of the rules that add some complexity. And so maybe the cooperation, in particular between Hong Kong and Japan, can improve.
I think it was maybe 20 years ago. For work, I used to travel to Hong Kong at least once a month. I did that for maybe 6 months to a year. And what I was always amazed was how international Hong Kong was. And then a little bit after that, it seemed not as international. And so I was wondering, recently, post-pandemic, if you could tell us what you are feeling, how Hong Kong is evolving through your own lenses, because I think all of you have different perspectives. Janzen-san, you said that you come to Japan once a month. Kenzo, you obviously live here, and Ken, you travel here often. How do you see that these days, and how do you think Japan is evolving?
Maybe let's do reverse order. How do we start with you, Janzen? Then we go Kenzo and Ken. Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Hong Kong. Of course, I love Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is evolving in a very good way. Of course, I mean, if you have been to Hong Kong, you recognize how good the city is. It's very convenient, very good lifestyles with good people, good food. We have all the best brands, international brands in Hong Kong. So I always travel around, and I used to study in Australia, actually, in Sydney. So in terms of working, Hong Kong is still my first choice. Yeah, because it's really a great city. And then, of course, I always travel to Japan. I love Japan. I mean, especially with the ties that Four Seas Group has been, about the Japanese food culture, Japanese food business. So I see, to be honest, I see some changes in Japan if I live here. I mean, for frequent traveler in the past few years, after the pandemic, I came back to Tokyo first time last year. I see there's changes, more foreigners coming. A lot of there's more. You'll be surprised. Actually, I'm quite surprised. There are much more Chinese restaurants here, very good ones, and yeah, I've been to a few. I'm so happy to see a lot of Chinese food products in Japan as well. And I've spoke to a lot of friends in Japan, and I think that there's more investors, foreign investors in Japan now, which is very good sign that I'm planning to invest more in Japan, particularly in some of the food companies where they've never thought about expanding their business in Greater China market. We're always here. I mean, to talk to them and see if they wants to invest, if we have synergies together to grow in the Greater China market. So it's very interesting. Thank you.
Well, Kenzo, you're based in Japan, so you feel the pain that all of us do based here on the tax side. I think we'd love to import the
Sorry,
Hong
to
Kong
be
tax
honest, I
regime.
live in Hong Kong.
Oh, you live in Hong Kong? Why did I think
Yes.
you lived in Japan? So
No. So I'm based in Hong Kong. I've been based in Hong Kong for 7 years.
Okay, but you spend a lot of time here, right? Coming back and forth.
Maybe I'm here twice a month.
Okay. So anyway, so you get the benefit, so you have a good perspective.
Yeah. I say Hong Kong for me is still the most international city in the world. That's why I live there. It's fantastic. During COVID, there was a small exodus of expats, but they came back very quickly. Is it as genki as before COVID? Maybe not. But I think it's still incomparable. I mean, incomparable to Tokyo. Tokyo, I love Tokyo, but Tokyo is frankly a backwater in comparison. We have to admit that. I think the fact that finally I feel like the international presence is coming back to Japan, maybe properly for the first time since the early 2000s, before 09 and the earthquake, is fantastic. It's really fantastic to have foreign investment here, and people come here and move here professionally and start new businesses here who are international. I think we should really welcome that because it's something that hasn't happened here for 20 years. Yeah.
Well, I base in Cathay Pacific. So, well, one thing I agree with both speakers, right? One thing is I actually see a lot of very attractive deals in Hong Kong now, right? Especially coming out from the government, right? I'm a businessman, so I'm listed in Hong Kong. I have to make sure the shareholder value are being upheld. But there's a lot of good deals. Government policy that I've never seen in my career of 28 years, right? So I do encourage the members here to really look at, and we definitely can provide the support to help you to navigate the different policies and support that the Hong Kong government is providing to foreign investment. The second thing is about Japan, right? Well, a year ago, it was super challenging for me to run a business here because I cannot find the talent that I want, right? People do not come to work more as often as before. Lenovo Japan, the office occupancy rate is 15% today, right? So I have many offices here, only 15% occupancy rate. And very difficult. I have senior leadership position that I cannot fill for 12 months. But I see the situation improving gradually because the government is more open in terms of getting talent outside from Japan. I think this is a positive move. I arrived very late last night because of Hong Kong delayed flight from Cathay Pacific again. I was very hungry, so I went to a ramen shop. And there was a Japanese serving. There's a Japanese, like the head of the shop, but all the other ramen, is it the right English? Worker in that ramen shop are coming out from Southeast Asia, right? So and the kombini has been a phenomenon here. So every company they do not have. You cannot find a Japanese worker there. They're all from Southeast Asia, right? But now, at least yesterday or last night, I figured out even ramen dian. So I see some positive move here. The other positive move is that we're advised by the government to encourage actually hybrid work. because the government realized the issue in terms of we lack of the capacity here as a working force, right? So actually, the remote work helped to unleash the capacity of, for example, housewife, female at home, so that they can continue to work, right? So a lot of these positive movement that I really appreciate as a businessman to do business here.
Well, thank you very much. I think you brought up some really interesting points at the last time about, trying to get the talent, using the remote workforce to also more maybe use some of the talent in Hong Kong, and there's some synergies there.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Yosuke Fujimori. I have based in Hong Kong 14 years. Yeah, well, I have been working with Hong Kong investors around 20 years. So I have seen a lot of a shift of change with the Hong Kong people, and a lot of, as you said, a lot of Hong Kong people come to Japan. They are much familiar to the Tokyo restaurant in Tokyo rather than me. I sometimes always ask them which is the best restaurant in Tokyo right now. So what is the motivation for the Hong Kong people or Chinese people to come to Japan, explore in Japan? It's like looking at the all over cities in the world, big Chinatowns are there, Los Angeles, San Francisco, but Japantown, we have very small. So what's the difference between Japanese and the Chinese? That's like motivation, or it's, yeah.
So that's a difficult. I'm going to have somebody put their hand up. Do we have one bold speaker to answer that question? Do we have any?
Why people want to go to Japan?
Yes, why people want to come to Japan, because you see them like living in, I guess not.
What's the driver to come to Japan?
I think, yeah. I mean, for me, food is number one. I think in all the surveys. Number two is the other stuff. Go ahead.
But for actually Hong Kong people, Chinese people, we love Japan, of course. So I've spoke to a lot of my friends where they are, moving to work here. So why not going to, well, your first question, because we have very similar, for food, for example, we have very similar eating habits that we believe we can grow our business in Japan. For example, as I mentioned, I'm going to open a Chinese restaurant here. And a lot of Chinese people, they love Hong Kong people, we love the atmosphere around here. So they think they have a great synergy to use, to use this kind of experience, food culture together to develop their career here. For example, in Niseko, you have many Hong Kong people in Niseko, right? So one of my friends in Hong Kong, you used to live in Hong Kong, right? In Wan Chai, there's one very famous hot pot, we call hot pot restaurant. It's like some kind of Chinese shabu shabu restaurant. The owner opened this shop in Niseko to serve the Hong Kong community in Niseko during wintertime. And that's the truth. So we develop these business here for the demand in Japan, for not only Chinese people living in Japan, considering we have over 600,000 population of Chinese now living in Japan. So not only them, but Japanese people love Chinese food as well. So we're here to develop. Yeah.
I think it's also the food, but also the culture and the history. I think that shared also relationship going back many years. But I think we had one final question.
Hi, Chihiro Odin from Last Bit. I used to live in Hong Kong for 15 years too. I left here 2000 and then came back here 2015. And a lot of things changed here, but at the same time, a lot of things didn't change in Japan. Like I was part of a diversity committee when I was in Lehman Brothers. And when I left Japan, I think the situation for women was about the same. But over, like first 23 years, unfortunately, we're not still there yet. And now a lot of immigrants are moving here. Like all my friends from Hong Kong came here. Number of high net worth individuals from Taiwan is massively coming because of what's happening in Kumamoto, what's happening in Hokkaido, right? Niseko, right? So luxury sector, we don't have enough people to serve. Like I would say Hong Kong is one of the best place for luxury. You get the best service ever, right? I was hanging out with family office in the US last 1 week, and she was saying Hong Kong is the best place. So now I'd like to know if you have any suggestion you may have for the people here in this group or like listed company or anybody to better get all these workforce because there are hidden talent here, right?
Kenzo, do you want to take that?
So I have a very controversial suggestion that's very Hong Kong based, right? The issue here is the Japanese language, right? And so there's only real one potential workforce, which is women in Japan. And I've tried to promote women working in my company for the last 20 years and failed. It just doesn't work. And it practically doesn't work because of the way we live. If you were in the finance industry or a very high income sector, it works because you can live in Minatoku, right? When your family lives in Chiba or outside, 1.5 hours, an hour outside from where you work, and you're a mother here and your child gets a fever from school, there's just nothing you can do. It's just too far away. It really mechanically doesn't work. So my theory is the only way to solve this problem is Hong Kong style with helpers. Yeah, and this is something that Hong Kong, I said Japan really needs to legalize, really needs to understand. And I think they made an effort a couple years ago in very typical Japanese style, where it's like, yes, you can now hire domestic help and whether it's for nursing or whatever it is. But you have to do this easy Japanese test. It's like, okay, let's look at this. I was like, can I see the Japanese test? Oh, I cannot pass this Japanese test.
I think you've raised, immigration still into Japan is a challenge. I think that I have a lot of friends that moved from Hong Kong that brought their helpers under a sponsor. It still, I think, is a critical issue. And I think the Japanese government is actually looking at it for the first time. But I think all of us need to be much more vocal and encourage that kind of change, because you're right, unless you come as a trainee, you have to usually pass a test, even in the healthcare sector, to get in. So I think that will be an ongoing challenge. Yes, that's probably a Jesper question for later or maybe over our cocktail hour. Anyway, let me thank all of our panelists today for their contribution. Thank you all very much.
So I guess this is our last panel. Let's get started. Fergus, let's start off with you. Can you share with us a bit about your background and what's your tie with Japan?
Well, thank you very much, Ronald, and thank you for Asia Society for having me here today. I'm the CEO of Daimon International Limited, which is the holding company of Daimon Shuso, a craft sake brewery based near Osaka. Actually, it's between Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara. A little bit about myself first, and we can talk about the brewery later. My connection with Japan really started as in my university days. Similar to the keynote speaker earlier today, I also studied Japan studies at Oxford. So I've been learning the language, learning the culture, learning the history. My thesis was actually on corporate governance in Japan in the 1990s and how that has changed. But I didn't go into the research side. I went into banking, I went into finance, I started in Hong Kong. I hear there was a Lehman alumni here, I was there. I was then moved. They asked me to come to Tokyo for 3 months. 3 months turned into 3 years, and I really, really enjoyed my time living here in Tokyo at the turn of the century in 2000. I met my wife here, actually, in Japan. So Tokyo is a very, very special place for me. When I went back to Hong Kong, I started moving away from the finance industry. I did more F&B related things in the food and in the beverage side. And in the last 5-6 years, we had the opportunity to acquire a brewery that was up for sale, which we did. And 4 years ago, I started taking on a much more active role in managing this company. So this is where we are at today.
Thank you, Fergus. We'll come back to sake later. Sam, what about you? What's your tie here?
So basically, I'm Sam Wu. I'm the executive director for Malvern College International of Asia. So we are the Asia Pacific partners for international schools in the region. So we have 4 schools, 2 in China, Chengdu and Qingdao, 1 in Hong Kong, and now we have 1 in Tokyo, which is in Kodaira. So my connection here dates back to probably my family business. Personally, it's been a very interesting fact that my grandfather's house was in Hong Kong was formerly the house of the Consul General of Japan. Yes, and then I was previously our family was in finance industries and also the insurance industry. So we have very strong connections with the banks and the finance sector here in Japan and the insurance companies here in Japan. And of course, I was still very young at that time. But then in university, I didn't study Japanese, but I studied in East Asian studies. So it's a very interesting thing to study the interactions between China, Korea, and Japan as a subject. So that probably helped me to become who I am right now, and why I had the interest to open the school here in Tokyo.
I see. And Akiyama, you have a Japanese name, so maybe instead of telling your association with Japan,
Right.
your association with Hong Kong.
Yes, I think I'm the unique one maybe today to be on the stage with a Japanese name, which I do have a Chinese name, a Hong Kongese name, Stephen Chan. So I am the CEO and also the founder of Inforich, which we brought our service at the back of the stage today, which is ChargeSpot. We do a power bank sharing service, which we brought from China originally, and now we're expanding in Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and also starting in Singapore. So probably I will be representing the startup side. A Hong Kongese originally started in Japan, and then we went IPO last year here in the Tokyo growth market. So just a little bit of my background. My father's side of the family, original Hong Konger, and I think my mother was the only Japanese which married the Chan's family. So I grown up as being a bridge between Japan and Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong until 10. I went back to Japan, came back to Japan, which I lived in Fukushima. And after that, I lived in Japan for 20 years, lived in Tokyo, and then college in New York, and then back to Hong Kong again with my daughter. So basically 20 years in Hong Kong, 20 years in Japan. So I think I can represent the Japan side of the mind today to speak a little bit on the stage.
You started out as a rapper.
Correct. Yes, I skipped that part.
Maybe we can rap later on, but...
Oh my God, that's nervousing.
But before that, you used to collaborate with a lot of Hong Kong musicians and artists.
Yes.
And then you started traveling back. Is that where the Inforich idea came about?
Thank you for mentioning. Yes, I actually skipped that part. I was under Universal Record Japan as a rapper, rapping in Cantonese, Japanese, and English. Yes, I had that career until 2009. And then I shifted. Actually, I started this business here in Japan. Yes. So talking about like how we expanded our ChargeSpot and also how we branded them is really related to also the earlier like conversation on the stage was talking about IP and contents in Japan. I think like branding with those like entertainment resources and also environment, it's like very unique for Asia to know about the brandness, like brand awareness of the product. So I think that totally helped me so much. Yes.
And Inforich stock price has gone up at least 70-80% over the past 6 months.
Oh, thank you for mentioning.
Take a look at that. Yeah. We'll come back to you on your battery charging stations and all that, but let's go back to Sam. You started an international school in Hong Kong called Malvern College. That was about 7-8 years ago, and just a few months ago, you started Malvern Japan. How did that come about? And can you tell me more about the whole planning and why Japan?
So it's an interesting process as well. So we opened the Hong Kong school in 2018, but it took us about 3 years to plan, and so that the planning started around late 2014, 2015, and at that stage we were looking at also another city in Asia to expand. So about at the same time, we looked into Tokyo. We did look in Japan. We did look into other cities, but of course Tokyo would be the first base for us to enter into the market. So the Hong Kong school opened 2018, but the Tokyo, given the pace of things here, it was still in the planning stage until during the pandemic, actually, where opportunities started coming. Like I think previous speakers mentioned, a lot of things popped up onto our radar. A lot of potential partners, sites, everything. It just came during 2020, 2021, and then around 2021, we narrowed down onto the current site in the Kodaira, and and things went very quickly. It's an existing site, so it was formerly a design school university, which unfortunately they had to combine 4 universities into one because of falling birth rates, low enrollment. So they combined it into one campus here in central Tokyo. But their campus in Kodaira presented a new opportunity because it's a university, so it's huge, and we can do a lot of things with it. Because for us in Hong Kong, the problem with schools is land. We cannot build big schools, but with that, this opportunity in Japan, we can. We have a lot of experience learning and all those things, which needs a lot of space for kids, and we can do it here in Japan. And so we opened in September just now, and our enrollment, for school, that is just in the beginning. We have about 160 students. That's quite a bit for new school. And going back to your question, why here is because we see that okay, we're both Asians. Okay, both places, Hong Kong and Japan, parents behave the same. They're very, they love the kids a lot in another way by pushing them to do academically. Yes, so we see the similarity, and parents always wish the best for the kids, and in Japan, I think it's like other speakers earlier said, it's more receptive to international ideas. Before international school is, it's a very touchy subject. They're afraid of kids going into international school systems and losing the Japanese identity and the culture. But we see it differently, especially after the Tokyo Olympics. That's where I think a lot of things change. So this is why I'm here.
And this is a collaboration between Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan as well, right?
Yes, because the real estate itself, it was bought by a Singaporean fund, and then we operate as a tenant operator. So it's actually more than just Hong Kong. So it's a 3-way collaboration.
So I guess through this connection, you could put your charge spot now at his school. But I'm not too sure if Fergus, you could put your alcohol into his school. So Fergus, what about you? How are you? How's business? How's the economy? Doing sake during the pandemic. Did sales go up or did sales go down? Can you tell us more about the business and obviously you're from Hong Kong, and why do you see the opportunity in the sake business?
Wow, that's a very big question. But first of all, no sake in schools. Okay, that's a really bad idea. Maybe it's sake in the car club in, but but after you finish driving, I think for sake, it's a very interesting industry. It's been around for 1,000 years. In the last 40 years, in the 1970s, just as a kind of a statistic fact, there were about 3,000 sake breweries in Japan in the 1970s. Today, there are about 1,200 licensed breweries. Some of them don't even operate on a day-to-day basis. So in Japan, it's definitely has been a sunset industry in many ways. The people interested in sake are said to be of an older generation. The youngsters don't drink as much alcohol. They don't drink as much sake. They're more interested in wine. So in Japan, it's been not easy in the last 40 years. On the contrary, globally, sake's interest has been phenomenal. In the last 10 years, sake export data has shown us that it's been growing 100% year on year in the last 10 years. As a data point, the top 3 sake export markets are China, America, and believe it or not, Hong Kong. Hong Kong as a market is almost, it's 3 times bigger than the next 2, which are South Korea and Taiwan. So Hong Kong is a huge sake drinking market. Obviously, some of it doesn't sit in Hong Kong, it goes elsewhere afterwards, but it's a very important connection hub. Ronald, your question about how the last few years has panned out, COVID has been tough, I think, for every industry. There were talks earlier about the luxury market being a great year for, a great year in sales for cars, for luxury products. Same with alcohol. There's been a lot of interest in sake, drinking at home, drinking in with friends who want to get together, drinking alone. But it's been not bad. However, we also needed to innovate. I think as a company that produces together with another 1,000 breweries, everyone are in the same shoes in many ways. We have been trying to be a bit more agile and nimble in what we do. We have been in the last few years, aside from identifying niche areas in the sake world, we also came up with some new products. So in 2 years ago, we started researching in a sake canned cocktail. Sake canned cocktail mean it kind of sake purists would not be happy, but what we've done is we've added flavors to these cans and adding kind of a sparkle effervescence to it. And we've started selling this in the UK market because the understanding of sake there is, I think, smaller in terms of just being a popular drink, but accessibility to RTDs, as they are called, ready-to-drink cocktails, has been a huge interest in the last 5 years. So we've been doing things like that in trying to get more people interested in the space of sake and eventually transition them from a cocktail to actually drinking the sake itself.
Earlier, we talked about the Greater Bay Area. Do you see sake having an opportunity in penetrating into this area and stationing in Hong Kong? I guess you could really bridge, right? Could you kind of comment on the GBA and what's your take?
Very much so. I mean, China is right now the world's biggest importer of sake, and this only happened in the last 3 to 5 years. Before that, it has been the US, with Hong Kong as a second kind of place, but China had leapfrogged in the last 3 to 5 years. GBA itself, as a few speakers have already mentioned, is one of the largest growing GDPs in the region. And with that, a lot of restaurants have sprung up, including Japanese restaurants. So that's definitely been a very big help in kind of creating the demand for sake. But on that point, we have also been trying to do something outside of the box by not just thinking of having sake paired with Japanese food. In the last couple of years, we've been having a big push about pairing sake with Chinese food, with French food, with Western cuisine. It's been an interesting process. We've been working with a lot of Michelin-starred chefs doing this in Hong Kong, in the UK, and in the US. We're talking to people there. The feedback has been very, very interesting, and we want to kind of like promote that sake drinking as well in other similar to wine, where you can probably get a lot more kind of like excitement from doing different pairings.
Just for the record, on the Greater Bay Area, we've got different data points earlier today, but for once and for all, I want to give you the latest data. We now have 86 million of people living in the GBA. The GBA is 9 cities in the mainland China and 2 cities, being Hong Kong and Macau, as special administrative regions. We have a GDP of 1.96 trillion US dollar, which is similar to the size of Italy. And in about 10 years' time, I think our GDP will surpass France, if not the UK or even Germany, to be the 5th, if not the 6th largest in the world. So I just want to give the facts right, because earlier on we had facts all over and they were kind of not up to date. But to really comment on the GBA, what about you with ChargeSpot? I know that entering and penetrating into the GBA has been quite challenging. Japan, they might like that, power bank, but in China, you've got a lot of copycats who do exactly what you do.
Well,
how are you navigating?
Well, exactly. We're the copycats. Yes. So originally it started in China in 2015, and by then I was still living in Hong Kong, also watching this movement, and they just keep on expanding. I think in China they have, I think like up to like 4 million those kind of boxes in every restaurant that no one is almost like bringing their like chargers. But then up to 2018, well, actually end of 2017, it wasn't happening in Japan. And so I saw a company in Hong Kong was a startup, which we acquired them, and then we brought it to Japan to say we're the first one in Japan. The time we brought it here, it was quite interesting. We brought it to a couple retailers and also railroad companies, and asking them, "Have you seen this before?" And they're like, "Yes, we've seen this like 2 years ago." And I just thought, then we can win, because I think that's the speed that sometimes they spend to put on to research in Japan, and I think that's a speed at which we can maybe from the Hong Kong side of view to bring into Japan to win with speed. So I think that's how we actually get into Japan. And talking about GBA, yes, we were lucky because that we had our R&D team, which the company which we acquired, which we had a team of like 60 to begin with, which was all engineers, Chinese engineers. They're fast. So like even localizing, bringing to Japan, it was easier and faster than even to think how we can localize it for Japan, even from the GBA side.
You talk about the speed. Can you comment on the cultural differences between Hong Kong and Japan, or in the GBA and Japan? Because obviously, I think you won your battle because of speed.
Well, no misunderstanding. I think both sides have their speed. It's just what comes first. So I think Japan is like very steady of like, and also taking their time to do the research, and then even to go to the starting point. But on the other hand, I think like Hong Kong, how we started our business in Japan was like we were studying and also brushing up while running. So I think it's a combination. So let's say, for example, when we got into 7-Eleven, yes, we talked for probably like 2 years, but then once we got started, it was like in all the stores. So, but if you think about in Hong Kong, or maybe in mainland sometimes, like under a business, if you pay another probably like 100 RMB, they would just like put another machine there, not yours. So it's really not like centralized. So I think like Japan is like very centralized. So take a little time than how the Hong Kong speed is. But once they get started, they're fast. But I think if you talking about like in the startup world, I think the Hong Kong speed, which takes value, because you need to keep on a lot of like experimental things going on while you are running, and I think that's also needed in the spirit.
I guess the Hong Kong people pivot more, they improvise more, right? Whereas the Japanese, they take a longer time to deliberate, to decide, but when they implement, they do it fast, right? So now,
Yep.
so this comes to Sam. You run a British school in Hong Kong, in Japan. How do you unite all? The value system, the culture, the education. How do you do it?
So first of all, across a lot of schools in Hong Kong and China and Japan, we place a great emphasis of the culture or of the host country or the region. So when we come to Japan or when we go to China, we do not try to turn the children into English people. Or the Japanese students, we don't turn them into English people. So what we do is we integrate the things here, the culture, the language, we integrate that into the curriculum, so they understand they are still a citizen, a Japanese citizen, but they share world values. So we place a strong emphasis on our core values, the things that kids should possess. And it helps us to actually synchronize across, because our entire group, we have schools we have another school in Middle East, and then of course our main campus in the UK. We are synchronized in that way because people would think, oh, the curriculum, the syllabus. A curriculum is an execution plan, how you teach the thing, but the core is what you teach to people. So if you maintain that throughout all your campuses in Japan, of course, they place a very strong emphasis on this. So you explain the core to the parents. You tell them we're not here in reinventing culture. We're actually building on top of Japanese culture, Japanese, the traditional way, and then you add in the international worldview and of course the English language. That works out. And then we will be having exchanges among our students. It's been happening in Hong Kong and China already, but at the right time we will also bring that into Japan.
So what are some virtues or values that Malvern brings regionally?
I think the first of all is, like I said, you respect your own culture, your own traditional ways. Yes, you're trying to find a new way in this ever changing world, but you still keep your own identity. That's the key. It makes you different from other people when you have your own identity. And of course, when you deal with people, the very basic values like being honest, integrity. Sometimes you have to do risk taking. If you're stepping out of your comfort zone. And also. And they also curiosity. Those are the things we try to bring out from the children.
But along the way, as you try to implement all these different syllabus in Hong Kong and Japan, do you see any hardship and challenges in working with the local government, local authorities? What do you see in this aspect?
I think it's very similar to what Stephen mentioned. Is when we operate in the Hong Kong speed and the Hong Kong, so I think that's the way is we explore multiple options. So to explain what you mean, I think it's a we might be doing the same thing, but sometimes we would think like 4 or 5 options of achieving the target. But in Japan, you may be only limited to 1 or 2 because that's how everything goes. And so you do not think of other side options. Again, that would be. I mean, the government is very helpful. Everything has been from the national to the local level. They've been very helpful. But the challenge is communicating to your partners. Okay, we thought of a few ideas. It could be a new idea, a new way of achieving the same target, and it's a bit of a compromise with them. Sometimes they're happy to see us coming up with new ideas as well, and so it's a whole process of talking and compromise. Of course, there's cultural differences, language, the documentation, everything is in Japanese. We are the bridge between also because we also report to our main school in the UK as well. So it's Hong Kong for us is a regional center that bridges the Japanese school, the Chinese school, mainland Chinese school, and the Hong Kong school with UK. So that's why we operate a center in Hong Kong for this purpose.
On speed and culture, can you now comment on Fergus on the speed of drinking? Who drink faster, the Chinese or the Japanese? I thought we'll just wake up together with this question, right?
I drink very quickly, but
yeah, please.
I think definitely the Japanese have had sake drinking culture for many hundreds and hundreds of years. In China, we have our huangjiu, which is very similar to sake making. It's also made from rice, and people also enjoy that. But I think, as I mentioned, in the last 10 years, there's definitely been a huge pivot of interest in looking at Japanese food, Japanese sake. A lot of Japanese culture has been a huge interest in the kind of, I guess, the middle class in China, and that has really created this boom and demand in Japanese sake.
Hong Kong, maybe 20 years ago now, cut tax on alcohol, right? So sake benefit from it.
Yes.
Right? And do you see further policy support between Hong Kong and Japan to import more alcoholic beverages or through that into other parts of China?
Importing into China is a little bit different because what they need is a certificate of origin. So typically from China in all the cities, you have to order directly from Japan. It could not have gone through Hong Kong. However, as Sam mentioned, as Hong Kong's played a pivotal role for this company that we're running, in that we are kind of connecting the Chinese kind of players to producers in Japan. Similarly, Hong Kong has connected, in our case, a lot of the Southeast Asian and other parts of Asian kind of markets for this. I think your earlier question of whether there's policy support in lowering further taxes, I think you're meaning kind of spirits. I think 30% ABV or below is currently free of tax in Hong Kong as an import, but I don't think there is going to be any change in that for whiskies and other things like that.
But I always thought Hong Kong could be a whiskey or wine auction, of course, but whiskey and hard liquor auction center. Maybe through auction you could lower on tax. I don't know. This could be a Hong Kong policy that you could eventually lobby.
We would hope that we will have your support in lobbying this.
Now, maybe I'll take the moment now to open up the floor for some questions, if any.
Thank you. This is Sam for Sam. My question is about like internationalization and especially of like students, because we've seen with the like kind of decreasing like available income for students, also the decreasing rate of students going abroad, especially in Japan. In the 80s, we hear the stories of all having many students in the American universities, and now not so many. What do you think if things keep going the way they're going, and obviously the economy is not going to boom again like it was in the 80s? What is going to maintain? What is going to help maintain this kind of awareness of the importance of internationalization in education for Japanese students? Because obviously, again, income is not going to be the main factor anymore.
Thank you. Very interesting question. Actually, I see the same thing as you do as well. First of all, when we were in university, hopefully that wasn't a very long time ago, okay? A lot of exchanges took place at the university level. You had study abroad, you would your university would place you on an exchange program at another university for a year or whatever. These things are already, it's for nowadays, it's already too late if you're exchanging only at the university level. What we're seeing is, even at the late elementary primary level, kids are beginning to have exchange programs. So at the secondary school level, it's very active nowadays for kids to go around and from visiting from other schools. And of course, sometimes cost is a factor. It's very true. Not all the kids can afford all these trips abroad. So for us, what we do here is we also try to exchange with local schools, local students. For kids who might not be in our international system, they are in the local Japanese system, but yes, they still have a chance to interact with international students, practice their English, have some fun. So that's the thing we're going forward with, and especially, yes, it's true. It's studying abroad for university is becoming very, very expensive, especially for the States. It's doubled or tripled from my time. So I think these sort of localized programs, we take them down to maybe, we doesn't have the international. We don't have to go to Europe. We don't have to go to the States. We can keep it within Asia. Just kids coming from Hong Kong to Japan, going back, it's cheaper option, but you still maintain the same level of interaction.
This question might be for anybody, I guess, but thank you, Ronnie. Basically, in my role at Eon, we've tried various versions of innovation management office to try to seed new innovation within the company. But over years, we found out that it's really hard to get rid of the risk aversion if they've been inside this company for too long. Additionally, in my role at Toshiba, I visit all the R&D centers, and the scientists, the researchers, the engineers, the physicists, they are amazing, but don't always have a clear idea how they're going to commercialize this idea. So basically, the question I have for you is entrepreneurship born? Can it be taught? Or are we just beating it out of everybody?
I came up with my idea, and thank you. We have it in Eon as well. Since I think like looking into the diverse and also the needs in Japan from the Hong Kong perspective. Since the reason why we also landed Japan and also have the government support in here is also the natural disaster. We free all the batteries, and that's some update which we did localize for Japan. And not only as a battery charger, we also have beacon in it. We also get data. We also do push notice and blah blah blah. More and more technology on top of that, like having like carbon point and so on. So these, I think, I was lucky living in Japan, understanding the needs of Japan, but also getting the technology idea from Hong Kong and also from mainland. So I think my answer is it's really the right time to have the right source and then to bring it to the right local. So I think we were lucky that in 2018, no one was starting this. And then I had this idea from Hong Kong, and then I just brought it to Japan. So I should say it was a timing for me. It wasn't, as said at the first comment, we were the copycat. I didn't develop anything, but actually I see the time machine business is now can be happen and from the mainland to Japan and brushing up in Japan, and then to, we call it maybe Japanize that, and then to bridge it to the world again with the Japanese standard. I think Inforich ourselves, we have that mission to actually move on. Yes.
I think when you launched it in Japan, it was also the time when Pokemon Go was very popular, right? And you did some collaboration.
Yes.
And then you did some collaboration with Ultraman.
Thank you. Yes.
Can you kind of
thank you for
mention
mentioning
that
that.
kind of
So
innovation?
that's something that earlier I've mentioned using Japanese like strong points, contents, and also IP. Yes, we had 5,000 spots in Pokemon Go online, which you can find the char spot mark. If you spin it, 3 digital coupon comes in. If you run out of battery, you can use those coupon for free. So it's an online and offline a service which we did also reaches out to Web3 and also like more after we have more prime locations. So I think that's also what we got from an idea from Japan actually to use the Pokemon Go, the popularity of that to reach out to Hong Kong and also Taiwan and also Thai, and now we're starting in Singapore. Yes.
So I have a very silly question. If my phone runs out of battery, how do I use it at charge spot? There's nothing I can do, right?
Actually, very specific, but yes, you have a charger on a larger machine, which you can use that to charge it from 0 to 1 and then go QR code scan it. But then we also have the NFC coming so that you don't, and also the face recognition. So we have like cameras on the bigger machine so that like upcoming, we're going to have like face pay. So that's also something that we're looking into.
Adding more questions to this is geopolitics, and we mentioned about localization. You know, with geopolitics, everyone's talking about de-risking, right? Do you see that being a challenge going forward as you expand outside of Japan into Asia? And this question also to the other panelists.
I think what we did is like we again said we localized in Japan, and then now we're bridging to the other countries. And the numbers in Japan, well, actually the business itself, comparing to what's happening in mainland, like per person, it's 5 times. per person, which we are asking for the payment in Japan versus in China. And what we also did was that the study with the structure of the business. So in China, they pay 80% to the agent versus in Japan, we structured it only like paying 15% to the agent. So like all these kind of brush ups, which we did in Japan. Now in our plan, like and then also our reports, we also show that this plan is working not only in Japan, but we're just adapting, like copy and paste it to Hong Kong. We also franchise it to to Taiwan. Taiwan now is going profit already using the same method which we did in Japan. And now we're also copy and pasting the business model also to Europe as well and also to Middle East. So what I'm trying to say is that I think like brushing up in Japan, it doesn't mean it's only working in Japan, but if it's a mature business structure, I believe that it also adapts to other Southeast Asia and also to other countries as well.
What about Sam? Any expansion plan after Japan?
So Japan, I think it remains a very interesting market for us, and we do think there is capacity for a second campus because, of course, we have something in Tokyo, but definitely southern Japan is another major market because, it's closer to China, Korea, and then Southeast Asia, Taiwan, and there's only 2-3 hours by flight down there to these places. That could be a secondary school. That could be another school right there. We did look into Southeast Asia, but I think for now, Japan is really on our radar for expansion. We aren't the only British school here in Japan. There's another school coming, already opened, and then there's a few looking into the market. So I think for education, it's very interesting. So competitors, we don't see other schools as competitors because it's a very unique product. Your kids like the school or your kids don't like the school. So we only compete in the sports ground. That's all I always say. But yeah. So the pie, the bigger the pie, I think the happier it is for all of us.
What about Fergus? Any projection into how geopolitics will shape the way you navigate your business in the coming years?
Very much so. I mean, in the earlier panel, Jenifer mentioned about nuclear wastewater, which Janzen answered. I think that's very much in our minds as well, because the fish that cannot be imported into Hong Kong, the fish that cannot be imported into China, would have a certain impact on the things that you have with sushi, which in this case is sake. So we have definitely been trying to diversify risk, going into the US markets, going into the European markets, going into the Southeast Asian markets, but also to, as I mentioned earlier, to think outside of the box. You don't have to have sushi to go with your sake. You can have your French meal with sake. You can have your Chinese food with sake. So that's kind of like the education process, which takes a bigger thing than just one company trying to do, but we have been talking to influencers, we've been talking to chefs, we've been doing that education around that space to make this a much more global drink. So that's kind of where we are. So the geopolitical issues would definitely have its problems, but there are also opportunities in that sense.
Actually, I have one question for Fergus on the sake. I think when we're thinking about entrepreneurship and innovation, I mean, bringing innovation to such a traditional market like sake, as you're saying, I mean, for Japanese, sake is paired with Japanese food. You're now expanding in the UK and adding flavors to it. How have you found changing the mindset of even the people at their brewery? Has this been a challenge, and how have you maybe used your Hong Kong, your bicultural experience to kind of utilize that to get people to that innovation space?
Short answer is yes. It's been difficult. I think a brewery with 200 years history, they have a lot of things ingrained in their mindset in certain ways. However, I've been very lucky working with Mr. Daimon, who's the 6th generation of the sake making family. He's 76 years old. but still very much an entrepreneur in many ways, and he has an open mind. So every time we have ideas, we bounce off one another, and then we talk through the pros and cons of everything. And he's been very open and receptive to a lot of this. We've, in the past few years, launched some premium products which included blending aged sake with fresh sake, which I don't think any other brewery has done. And we have received very, very good feedback from Masters of Wines. We've received very good feedback from, we put it into an auction in Sotheby's, which got garnered way above the high estimate. So things like these have made it very, very interesting for the brewery to kind of like say, now that we've tried this, let's do something else. So we've become a lot more innovative in that sense, and we continue to try and look for new markets to open with that.
So I'm a Brit who between mainland China, Hong Kong, and Japan. So there's some admin issues there, and there's some talent issues I want to talk about, because I have noticed, and just got my permanent residency in Hong Kong recently, finally sorted it out. The APEC business card is great for moving around these places. But one thing I noticed, and I employ a lot of people in the mainland, but a number of them are getting this top talent visa to Hong Kong. So these are mainlanders who, if they graduate from the top 100 schools, and that's actually globally, it's not just including, Tsinghua and Beida and all that, but globally, you're seeing people like Hong Kong is opening up to both domestic mainland talent coming in and international talent. And so I think that's important because if you're talking about a deficiency of, say, young entrepreneurial types in Japan, there is this growing, it's kind of a melting pot again happening in Hong Kong. There are younger foreigners coming back into, like Westerners, let's say, into Hong Kong. That's noticeable, which is not the case in Shanghai, Beijing, etc. So you were saying Hong Kong is regaining some international vigor, but I think also this mainland link of talent is quite noticeable. And the GBA is real. I just spent a week in Shenzhen, and actually the integration is really happening now, including things like, your MTR pass, the pass you would have in Japan. The equivalent is suddenly you could use that around the region. So we're seeing a lot more integration happening also across border in terms of financing as well. I think people earning in Hong Kong can finance property in the mainland. That's coming soon. So just to say that talent and the administrative barriers it's really changing actually. So I encourage this access to the GBA for Japanese through Hong Kong, plus maybe some inbound benefits like bringing international talent in and out of Japan. And tapping into Chinese mainlanders now increasingly working in Hong Kong, who a lot of them are very interested in Japan as well. So it's a jigsaw piece. It's a little hard to explain, as I've demonstrated, but I do think there is a real reason for optimism on this convergence. I think I would also like to salute Asia Society for putting this panel together, because you think it's a niche topic, but it's actually not. It's actually pretty impactful for the next 10, 20 years. Thank you.
To add on what you just said about Hong Kong, about this talent import.
Yep.
You mentioned that they want to recruit, top talent from 100 top universities. To my latest knowledge, 70,000 were accepted for this application, and the requirement is if you could make about 300 to 350,000 US dollar a year, then you are eligible to apply for it. So we've got 70,000 applicants already. One thing to watch out for is we are attracting talent from at the top level. What's missing now and what drives the unemployment is the supply chain below that. That's where people that we should look for in collaborating with our neighbors. It's not just top talent, it's the entire supply chain that's missing out. So one thing to keep note.
In all of your organizations, how do you see diversity in your organization, especially in a very traditional industry like Fergus, San's sake industry, and education? I think for Akiyama-san's Inforich, it's a little bit different. But how do you seek talent, and also how do you see diversity within your organization?
Maybe I'll take this first. So indeed, our sake making process has been passed down through 6 generations. Daimon-san's son, the 7th generation, is currently a kind of apprentice. And in Japan, as you know, an apprentice works for 50 years before he becomes a master toji. So he's been doing it for a decade. So he's 40 years to go before he actually graduates. But we have, our team is predominantly Japanese in the production side. In the last few years, we've hired a lot of international personalities. We have someone international here tonight. I won't spoil the surprise, so let's go son mention later. But we've hired talents from the States, from Europe, from Hong Kong and Asia, and really filled the brewery with these talents to help that business expansion grow. And I think with this diversity, it broadens people's mindsets as well. To Jenifer's earlier question of innovation and how to get that going, is to bring in different cultural diversity in this sense, to get the people to keep an open mind and to explore different things.
Share a bit of my what I observed. So for us, luckily, because we're international school, so diversity is built in already. But one thing is, when we opened our schools here in Japan, there's of course because we're very focused on retaining the culture aspects. So our staff is actually very mixed. So a lot of them, of course, they come from abroad, from English-speaking countries, the teachers. But a lot of other, you also have the Japanese teaching staff. You also have the Japanese administration staff as well, and you have a very international management staff as well. The headmaster is also from the UK. So what we do is we try to we encourage them to integrate with to commingle actually, and actually this brings out a very positive effect on the students as well, because when they see the staff members, oh, they're from everywhere, and they're trying to learn from each other's languages, cultures, and it's a good influence on the students. So for us, it's been a very positive process.
Talking about our team, we have 30% of foreigners in our Japan team, and also in the group, we have like 60%, which is foreigners, mainly Chinese and also Taiwanese. But I think I want to focus on, like, from a startup point of view. We survived the COVID period because we had diverse investors, and also since this idea was from mainland. First, when we brought it to Japan, no one was like, no investors was like, is this going to work? But then what happened was that since China was massive, again, like there were like 2 million already by then, and Hong Kong investors and also Singapore investors, of course, like mainland investors, they understand the concept and they understand that's going to work. So actually, I gathered that investors crowd from Hong Kong to start, to have the Japanese investors to understand, and then to juggle. So I think I'd like to say the diverse of the team of investors. This is what Japan and Hong Kong from the startup standpoint can do. And also, I think we are one of the case that we proved.
I know we are running out of time, so the last question comes back to me. Any recommendation as to how Hong Kong and Japan could work closer together? Any advice for both places for 2024?
I'll answer for you. Drink more sake, right? I think for us in our sector, it really depends on the interaction of people, interaction of kids, and and I think that's one thing we can promote. Is, understand each other more. You hear a lot of things on the news, whatever, but when you're here yourself, or when you're there in another place, you would get to see the thing firsthand.
Well, on that note, I would love to invite all of you to Hong Kong sometime next year. Give us a shout, and I do hope that Asia Society Japan will bring a delegation to visit us next year. I think that would be the best cultural exchange and to get to know each other more. So on that note, I would like to thank all the panelists and all the audience for joining. Thank you.